Now that we have our snazzy new reviews, let's add them to our property page. Since we're going to be filtering reviews, we'll need to use a new Algolia endpoint called query. I've left a link to the docs in this lesson's description if you want to explore it more. So here's the pattern. Ah, notice this is a post request now instead of a simple GET request. That should be fun. Open your editor to the Data API plugin. We're going to be adding a new method that returns reviews based on an home ID. Create a new function called getReviews by home ID with the parameter of home ID. Just like getHome, let's create a fetch with async await. Let's use the pattern from the documentation and fill in the URL. Just like before, let's also pass an object with the headers property. By default, fetch uses a GET request. This is a type of HTTP request that gets sent when you visit a website. Algolia needs POST. That's usually for when you're sending forms or other large pieces of data. To make a fetch use POST, we have to add a property called method with the value of POST. The next part is a little tricky. In order to pass POST data, we have to fill in the body property. Since we're going to be sending JSON, we actually have to use JSON stringify. What this does is take an object and makes it a string so it's suitable for sending in our request. Later, the receiver, which is Algolia, will use JSON parse to turn it back into an object again. Here, let me show you. Notice stringify strips out symbols, functions, and undefined and replaces them all with null. That's because in JSON, there is no equivalent, so that's the best it can do. Alright, let's add a body property with the value of JSON stringify and pass it an object. In order to tell Algolia we want to filter by home ID, we have to give it to the filters property. Its value is the facet and value you want to filter by, separated by a colon. Let's add that inside our empty object. Now let's return our result and unwrap it just like we did before. And don't forget to add our standard try-catch logic too. Great! Now let's add this function to the inject at the top of our file. And save. Okay, now it's time to add this data to our property page. Let's open it up and go down to our async data function. We're going to be calling more APIs here, so maybe response isn't such a good variable name anymore. How about home response? Let's update this. Now to make this easier, let's copy the first two lines of this function and replace home response with review response. Now let's rename our copy of getHome to getReviews by home ID. Last, we have to return our data. Since our API call is a query, it will return multiple results. Algolia stores these in an array called hits. Let's see what this looks like. So there's our hits property. It's an array. And depending on the query that we gave it, those object results will be in here. All right, let's add a new property called reviews to our return object with the value of review response.json.hits. The only thing left now is to show our reviews on the page. We'll just toss the data on the screen, make it look pretty later. Under our map, let's add a div that loops through the reviews and uses the reviews object ID as key. Now let's use the reviewer's image property and add an image. As usual, just toss in a line break after. Okay, just to make sure we're good so far, let's take a look. Save and check out your browser. Alright, we see some faces. Now let's add the reviewer's name. Then add the review date and comment. Save and check your browser. Great, things are coming through. Some of you may be looking at the date and scratching your head. That's ISO 8601. No, it's not a trendy new disinfectant spray. It's a date format. It's a way to store the date that encapsulates the full date, time, and time zone. It's quite popular and really handy when you want to translate dates into local time. Speaking of time, I think we just ran out of it. I can almost hear you groaning on that one. Alright, next up, let's get that ugly time into something more meaningful and some other tweaks.